Hey guys, this is Hayes with CheatSheetPros.com. Today's November 26th. It's Saturday after Thanksgiving, and I'm working on the college hoops cheat sheet. So I wanted to kind of show you a little bit of what it's going to look like and kind of walk you through some of the beginnings. So it's going to be real similar to last year, except for I renamed some of the models and kind of boxed them out. I'm also trying to bring in the team schedules down here, which this hasn't been updated for a couple of days. I'm just trying to get the data pulled together. And then some of these extra stats that you don't need to worry about, I kind of pushed them down to the bottom. I put all the main stats over here in the corner and kind of left everything that we want to look at right here in the front. So we've got all the strength of schedule, last 10 power ranking, adjusted offense, defense, adjusted pace, so you can get a glimpse of what the teams are doing. And then over here, this was a favorite last year for a lot of people. We have the totals and ATS records for sports betting to show you what it's like overall. And then you can look at them on the road, home, and there's so many neutral courts with tournaments and everything. We have the neutral broken out on the side. And then we have the straight up record over here. Down here is going to be our total checker, same as last year. We've got a low and a high range and a middle. If you don't want to go in and look at these details, you can just go right here. We got the total range, so say 140 to 144 is kind of where this game is looking. There's always some influx in the game, so something to keep an eye on. And then we also have combined points per game last three and allowed points per game last three, so you can see a difference. And then we've got a percentage of variance, which we won't dive into a lot. We didn't really use it a lot last year. And then over here we got kind of a roto pace, would put it at 145. It's just a different way of calculating it. So this particular game, UConn and Alabama, was played yesterday. I did not update the data for the sheet yet today, so I updated it yesterday morning and just kind of saved it because I was running around with family doing some Black Friday shopping and whatnot. But today I wanted to sit down and kind of run through some games, look at the models, see if they're calculating correctly, kind of where they're pointing. And the same thing as college, we've got our Cheat Sheet Pro model, which is our main one right here. So this is kind of the one that I built and put together that I really like looking at. And then we've got the power model, which is similar to college football, where if you have a huge difference, like the number one school facing the 98th school, there's going to be a large gap, and those stats are going to be different because they have severely easier strength of schedules. So that's kind of the model we would look to. But what I do is I kind of, when I pull this up, I'm going to look here, see what that one says, look here, and then the recap is going to be these three right here. So this power model is going to be a score here. The cheat sheet model is going to be here. And we're going to call this one Twisted Palm. I'll go over it in a minute. We're going to kind of put it here. And then I've got kind of a consensus average of these three if you kind of put them all together. So if you're just looking for one thing to look at, I would look at this consensus average. And this is kind of what we're going to go off of. So this is going to give you a projected score that has all three models pulled together. So what that's going to do, it's going to give you my opinion. It's going to take the one from Twisted Palm, kind of average it out, and then our power model is going to put a little bit of skew on it based on the difference in the power rankings to kind of give us an interesting little one. A lot of the games I looked at, the cheat sheet model did really good yesterday. And then I put this one over here. I originally had the mix model up here, and that was the only one, but I decided to go with the consensus. But I still want to follow this one early on in the season. And what this is I've noted the Twisted Palm, they are usually way off on the total. So you can see here they're projecting 154.4, but they're really good on knowing what the difference is between the two teams as far as points. So mine was really good on the total, but not as good as Twisted Palm on the sides. Now, I've only looked at about 20 or 30 games, so it's a small sample size. So what I did is a mix of this is I took my total of 142 that it's spitting out and the difference of the Twisted Palm model, and then did a projected score over here that we can take a look at. So keep that in mind. But we're going to flip through. We're going to look at like 5 games from yesterday, and then I'm going to play with kind of updating it. I've got some stuff behind the scenes that I'm working on where I can go in and data import once or twice a day the bet percentages and schedules and stuff like that, but that's getting a little bit more difficult, so I kind of hid that, put it on the back burner. I'm still working on it, but I wanted to show you what the main tab is going to look like. So we're going to flip through some of these games. As always, you click in the top or the bottom and you get this drop down and you can flip through the teams. You can also type them in, but they have to be typed how they are. Like, for example, North Carolina. Some places it's UNC, some places it's spelled out North Carolina, some it's North CAR, some it's just the letter N space Carolina. So you got to kind of know it. But once you understand how the schools are labeled, you can flip through it. And then we can also look at the schedules. So real quick. Sorry, my watch binged me. Okay, and then over here we have the Ken Palm rank. So the Twisted Palm, that is a mix of the Ken Palm model. It's not exactly, he twists some stuff around a little bit, but it's pretty close to kind of what his model is going to spit out, and it's easy to update and take a look at side by side. It's really close to what Vegas has, which is kind of scary. So typically what I've been watching is the open line, which we can see over here, and then the current line, and this is just going to update when I do my update. But it gets the line in there so I can at least look at it and see roughly what it is. And then we got the changes, and then we've got the totals over here. So let's go ahead and just take a look at some games. So I already had this one in, so I'm going to flip down here to UConn and Alabama. Let me pull it up and see if you can see it on your screen. Okay, so here we have UConn, Alabama. So UConn ended up winning 82-67. So that's 120, 30, 40, 149 total points. The spread was 1.5, so it was a tight game. So UConn rolled, and it looks like 150.5 to 148.5, and it fell at, what do we say, 149. So it fell right in between there. You can see our total range over here. We had 140 to 144, so it just slid over that, depending on where you would have bet it at. As far as the side, the consensus average, not a lot of difference. You know, we had UConn winning by 1 as a 1.5 point dog, so there's only 2.5 points of difference there, but it would have won. A total of 147, and it ended up 149, so that consensus average is pretty good. Over here on the cheat model, we had 73 to 70, so we had UConn winning by a few more points with 142. The Twisted Palm was 77 to 77, 154, so you can see the total was overshot a little bit, and all of them basically had it as a tight game. So this had UConn by 1, we had UConn favored by 3, this one had them favored by about a half, and then our mixed model had it about pick'em, so pretty close. There, nothing really jumped out at me. As far as the consensus average, it just put a lean on UConn as a dog, and that one did okay, so that wasn't too bad. Let's look at, let me see if you can see. So down here in the corner, we got Iowa and Clemson. So Iowa and Clemson, it looks like Iowa's favored by 8.5. You can see they were significantly better than Clemson. So the cheat power model, we had them by 17. The cheat sheet model, we had them by 8. The Twisted Palm had them by pretty close to Vegas, about 7.5. The Twisted Palm flipped it, and we actually had, actually that's backwards. I got to change those numbers, so that's good. I haven't released it yet. So we had it by 8. So if we come over here, we look at the consensus average, which would be kind of the go-to. We had an 80 to 69, total of 149, and Clemson, I'm sorry, this is upside down. So Iowa by 11. So this would have led you to lay Iowa minus 8.5, and I don't think it covered, no. So Iowa, they won the game 74 to 71. We had a total of 145. I didn't grab the release here. But our range, it was right in the middle. We had 135 to 155. So the last game we looked at, there was only 4.5 points difference. So that's pretty consistent. This one is pretty wide. Now, the reason that usually is because you get something like this where the combined points per game is 175, but the allowed is 126. So you have good offenses and good defenses. And so when they mesh together, one's got to give. Either the defense is going to do really well or the offense is going to do really well. So it's going to kind of narrow it a little bit. So you can see our low range was over what each team was allowing, but our high range was not quite as high. And so it fell kind of in the middle. So that's good. I like to see that. It ended up at 145. Our consensus was 149. However, we had Iowa by 11. They only won by 4, so they would not have covered that. As far as the individual ones, the cheat power model would have lost because we had an 82-67. This one fell really close. We had it -8, 77.69. It was 74.71. So I really like my model on that one. It would have it would have been right around the Vegas spread. Twisted Palm is pretty much really close to Vegas, 7.7 with a score of 80 to 73. You can see they overshot the total again, 154. Mix 8 with 146. That one was really close. So interesting how it's kind of spitting some of this stuff out, and everyone is always going to ask, like, what do I bet? You know, what they just want something to say, hey, bet this. Well, it's not that easy, especially when you get into college sports. You have to look at a lot of the numbers. So what I recommend is at the end of the day, once the sheet's released, go back and put in the games and look at the 3 models and see what you like. Like, maybe you like this Twisted Palm model, and that's the one you're like, hey, I'm going to follow this. They've been consistent. Top 25 schools, they've done really well. Or if you don't want to do it, just kind of look at the consensus average and say, hey, find a game that's really off. And if there's a game that's really off, you could look at it and, you know, look at some of these ATS numbers and see, like this one, you would have looked at Iowa. They're 4-0 against the spread for 100%. Clemson's 1-4 against the spread for a 20% hit rate. So yeah, this probably would have led me to Iowa, and I would have said, hey, I'm going to lean Iowa for a slight cover. We'd have missed it, but that's kind of where it would have pointed me, the direction anyway. Some of these other bigger schools, let's look at Oregon, Michigan State. Oregon, I think this is Michigan ST. So if the first part is long like Michigan, the second one is just going to be ST, but if it's something real short, then state will be spelled out. Or you can just click in here and kind of flip down. Like here you see Miss State is spelled out because the Miss is shorter. And then you got Miss Valley State, you got Mississippi, Missouri, then Missouri State. Missouri spelled out, ST's a little one. So I kind of have most of the schools memorized, so I kind of know how to type them in, so I can go through it pretty quick. So Oregon, Michigan State, looking at this one, line opened at 3.5, 2.5. So Oregon and Michigan State, we're going to say 135, 2.5 point dog, pretty tight game. Looking at this, Michigan State won 74 to 70, so we had a total of 144. Our consensus would have been under that, so we had 136, and we can see the line dropped a point, so everybody was betting the under. And this was interesting. So the Twisted Palm, 137, 136, and we had a range of 130 to 141, so it went slightly over that, which is fine. And then we had Michigan State winning by 2 as a 2.5 point favorite, and they won by 4. So you would look at this and say, hey, tight game, nothing really jumps out. One side's not lopsided by any means. So our projected scores, you would look at it as 70 to 66, 68, 68. So pick 'em, 71, 67, 70, 66, and a consensus 69, 67. Final was 74, 71. So fairly close. Let's look at another. So let's look at Duke and Xavier. So Duke and Xavier, Duke opened at 3.5, moved to 5.5, so they took a couple of points. Our consensus average here, we had Duke -5, winning 74 to 69 with a total of 143, and it was 71 to 64. So that one was pretty close. So they scored 71. Our consensus average had them at 74, which would be great for same game parlays. Xavier put up 64. We had him at 69, so that's really good considering the variance and how many different ways things could go. So they end up winning by 7. We had them winning by 5, so getting a little better, a little close in there. So total 120, 130 was 135. Our range was pretty wide, 128 to 151. And then you can see here, the Twisted Palm, they shot it at 149, so they overshot it again, which seems to be something pretty consistent. Mine was 140, and what did we say? It was 135, so we were a lot closer. My model had it 73.68. It was 71.64, so pretty close. But again, I would look at this, and if the spread's 5.5, we got them winning by 5. I'm not going to go either way. A half a point's not enough for me to sway in either direction, especially if I look at this and I see, okay, Duke's 1-5 ATS, no, I'm sorry, that's a total. So they're 3-3 ATS, so 50-50 wasn't terrible. And then once we get going, you can look down here at this schedule, and I'll have a flag for common opponents, a C or something that pops up here, so you can see how teams have done against common opponents. But again, we would have said, okay, pretty close to Vegas, 74-69. Final was 71-64. 135, consensus 143, so pretty close. Purdue and Gonzaga. So looking at this one, so Gonzaga opened at 5.5. It was 6.5 when I did the sheet update. So we'll say Gonzaga 6.5. When we look at this, now the consensus average, we had it 73-73. So pick 'em. So here you have a 6.5 point difference. So this would have put a play towards Purdue. The other games we've looked at, they've been really close. You know, half point, pick 'em, point, point and a half, 2 points. That's not enough for me in basketball. I don't have an exact number that I would go with, but here we have a 6.5 point difference. So when I updated this, if I was flipping through the games, I would say, okay, Purdue is plus 6.5, and our consensus average, we have a pick 'em. So I'm going to go ahead and take the 6.5 points and go with that. Now let's look at our models. So over here, our power model, we had it, Zaga is a higher power rank, and we still had it 71-71. And then my model actually had Purdue by 4, 73-69. So that's a huge gap. If they're getting 6.5 and I've got them by 4, now we're at 10.5 points different. And then over here, the Cheat Palm one had it 4.5, which is not quite as good as Vegas. So Vegas went the opposite direction. I would have expected this to open at 5.5 and go to 4.5 after looking at this, but it went to 6.5. So that would have gave you a little bit of value on Purdue. Over here, so the final was 84-66. Purdue absolutely rolled them. As far as the total, that is 60, 60, 120, 130, 140, 150. And Twisted Palm, 155. They're typically about 5 points over, so maybe there's something to that. And we had 142, so we had it slightly lower. But our consensus average had it right in the middle, about 146, and it ended 150. So this would have been a play on Purdue plus the points, which would have came out well. Total range 134 to 150. 0.7 ended at 150. So it was on the high side, but it kind of fell in there. So that was good. So I like seeing that. That's very positive. Tennessee and Kansas. Let's look at two more real quick. And Kansas. I live about 30 minutes from KU, so I follow them and get them on TV quite a bit. So that's one team that I keep up with. So this one opened up Tennessee minus 1.5. I saw this while I was Black Friday shopping. Kansas just doesn't have the height. I knew they were going to struggle in this game, but I did not bet it. Over here we have our three models, but our consensus average, we had Kansas minus 4, or I'm sorry, Tennessee minus 4. I need to flip this number. Here with a total of 138. I didn't get a total when I reran the sheet, but we had a total of 135 to 141. It ended up being 119, 114. So it went much lower than this number over here, but we had, so Tennessee won by 14. This model had Tennessee by 6. This one had Tennessee by 3. This one had Tennessee by 3. And then this one had Tennessee by 3. So a pretty consistent Tennessee by 3. This would not have pointed me to a play on Tennessee because our consensus average was really close to the Vegas line. Although you could have looked at this and said, hey, you know, I want to go one way or another. Kansas has been really good. Or no, they haven't been really good. I keep mixing up the total ATS and ATS. So they're 1-5 against the spread. So maybe that would have pointed you a different direction. This would have been close enough. Spread of 1.5. We got them by 3 to 4 points. I would have stayed away from it. As far as the total, I don't know what it was on the Vegas side. So let's go ahead and look at this last game. North Carolina and Iowa State. So Iowa State is spelled out. So line opened at 4.5, moved to 5.5. So we have North Carolina minus 5.5. Our consensus average has actually Iowa State favored by 2. So this would have been a little bit of a shocker for me. And I need to flip this number here so it's correct. So we had 73-71, Iowa State winning the game, and they were getting 5.5 points. So looking at the game, they won 70-65. Let me make sure you can see that. Yeah, they won 70-65 as a pretty decent dog. So that's surprising. I like seeing that consensus average. As far as the total, 120, 130, 135, we had a consensus of 144. And what's funny is Twisted Palm had 144. We had 144. Everything was around 144. But you can see the line moved against you because it opened at 142.5, moved down to 140.5. So typically these line moves have been money so far that we've seen that have moved more than a couple points. I'd have been curious to see what this moves at by game time, but our consensus model, you'd have looked here and said, hey, we have Iowa State by 2. They're getting 5.5 points. That's 7.5 points of difference. So Iowa State would have been a play, and it would have easily covered. They were down 2 points at the half, so you'd have felt good there. And then they came out and they won the second half 38-31. So flipping through this, there would have been 2 possible plays. Iowa State is a dog. That one won. And then what was our other one down here? Purdue is a dog. They won. Looking at the sheet, I like Tennessee just off knowledge, but looking at the sheet, I would have stayed away from that one, so I'm not going to count that one. So I'd say if you'd have flipped through these with the big named schools, it would have given you a couple good plays to look at that were 5.5 to 7.5 point different than the line. So I like the way the sheet looks. I like what it's spitting out. I just need to get this schedule part updated. I want to update the banner over here and make sure all the data is pulling correctly, and then work on a Vegas pull. And I'll probably go ahead and get this released in the next couple of days. I've had a lot of questions on it, but I wanted to put the video out there and let people kind of see what it's going to look like and how I would walk through games. I typically don't have time every day to go through every single game and find the plays for you, but I will have the sheet updated and I will have it out there so you can flip through the plays and kind of see what you like and form your own opinions. But anyways, good luck, guys. Hopefully I can get this up in the next day or two and flip from college football to college basketball. Thanks, guys.